The call that changed everything. It had been a normal Tuesday morning. I had my coffee, went through my emails, and prepped for the meeting with my team. 15 years of late nights, missed weekends, and hard work. I had given everything to the company. It wasn't just a job to me. It was my life, and I was loyal, too loyal, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. I had just finished a call with a client when my boss, David, asked me to come into his office. I thought it was about the upcoming project we were launching. Little did I know, this meeting would be the end of everything I had worked for. "Sit down," he said, his face grim. My heart dropped. "Your position has been eliminated due to restructuring measures," he added coldly. I froze. Did he just say what I thought he said? Fired? Me? After everything? David handed me a piece of paper, his eyes not meeting mine. "We've appreciated your dedication over the years. You'll receive a severance package, of course, but the decision is final." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The room felt small and suffocating. I stared at the piece of paper in my hand, my brain refusing to process what David had just said. "This can't be happening," I muttered, but David didn't seem to notice. He sat there, completely detached from the shock that was slowly suffocating me. For 15 years, I had given everything. I'd stayed late, taken on extra projects, and made sacrifices that no one else would. And yet, here I was, being handed a piece of paper with my name on it, my entire future swept away without a second thought. "David," I said, my voice shaking, "I don't understand. I've worked my ass off for this company. 15 years. You know how much I've done. How could you just fire me?" David didn't look up from his desk. He adjusted his tie and sighed as if my questioning was an inconvenience. "Look, it's not personal. The company is restructuring, and it's nothing against you. You've been a great employee, but you know how this business works." How this business works? Was that really how he saw it? A simple business transaction, without any regard for the loyalty and sacrifices I had made? My mind raced. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. This wasn't just about me. This was about everything I had built for myself, everything I had sacrificed. But what struck me the most was the coldness in David's voice, the lack of any real emotion. This wasn't just a professional decision. There was something deeper here, something more personal. My gut told me this wasn't just about restructuring. It was about something else, something I couldn't see yet. As I walked out of his office, the reality of it all sank in. I had no job, no direction. I didn't know what to do next. I picked up my phone and called my husband, Ben. I needed to hear his voice, to have some sense of stability. But when I dialed his number, I didn't expect what happened next. The phone rang, but it went straight to voicemail. Confused, I texted him, "Call me. I need to talk." But there was no response. Ben was always good at replying. Always. And that's when I started to get that sinking feeling in my stomach. Something wasn't right. I tried to shake it off. My mind was clouded with thoughts of my career, my future, and what this sudden change meant for me. But there was that nagging feeling that something had been set in motion that I couldn't control. The next few hours felt like a blur. I tried calling Ben again, but there was no answer. It was unlike him. He was always quick to respond, even when he was busy. My fingers hovered over the phone, a gnawing feeling growing in my chest. I had to know what was going on. That's when I decided to do something I hadn't thought of before, something desperate. I logged into our shared bank account. I'd never snooped before, but something inside me told me it was time to take a hard look at the financials. My heart pounded as I scrolled through the recent transactions. Then I saw it. Several large withdrawals from our savings account, all in the last few weeks. The amounts were staggering, and the description on the transactions didn't make sense. "Business expenses?" I read aloud to myself, my voice trembling. But this was no business expense. This was our personal money. The worst part? They were all signed off by Ben. I had to sit down. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped my phone. I stared at the screen, the truth slowly sinking in like a rock in water. My mind raced, but the only thought that kept looping was, why wasn't he telling me? I'd been so caught up in the aftermath of the firing that I hadn't even considered the possibility that something else was going on. But now, it all clicked into place. The missing calls, the evasive behavior, the sudden secrecy. Ben had been hiding something from me. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I couldn't let this go. I had to know why. Without another thought, I grabbed my coat and left the house. The drive to Ben's office felt longer than it should have. My mind was still racing with questions, each one more terrifying than the last. I pulled into the parking lot, my hands gripping the steering wheel as I took a deep breath. This wasn't just about my job anymore. It was about the life I thought I had with Ben, everything we had built together. Was it a lie? Was he planning something I couldn't see? When I walked into his office, the receptionist looked up in surprise. "Oh, Mrs. Harris, Ben's in a meeting right now," she said, looking uncomfortable. "Is he expecting me?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended. She shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not sure, but he's in with someone important. Maybe you should—" "No, I'm going in," I interrupted, cutting her off. I walked past her, ignoring her protests. My heart pounded in my chest as I approached Ben's office door. I could hear voices inside, low and muffled. I knocked once, then opened the door without waiting for a response. What I saw stopped me dead in my tracks. Ben was sitting across from someone I didn't recognize, but it wasn't the man who made my blood run cold. It was the way Ben was sitting, his posture stiff and defensive, his face pale. He looked up as I entered, his eyes widening in surprise. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" But before he could say another word, I noticed the papers on the desk. My papers. The divorce papers. My heart dropped into my stomach. The papers. I didn't need to look any closer to know exactly what they were. Divorce papers. The room seemed to spin, and for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. I stood frozen in the doorway, my body tense and rigid, like a deer caught in headlights. I couldn't make sense of what was happening. My mind was racing, trying to piece together everything that had led me here. Divorce? From Ben? After everything we'd been through together, after years of marriage, years of building a life together, this was the last thing I ever expected. Ben's face went pale, and he tried to speak, but no words came out. His eyes darted nervously to the man sitting across from him, who I had now noticed was dressed in a sharp suit, looking as though he had just stepped out of a corporate boardroom. This wasn't just some casual meeting. "What is this?" I managed to whisper, though my voice barely recognized itself. Ben stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Sarah, I didn't want you to find out like this." His voice was shaky, but he couldn't meet my eyes. Instead, he turned to the man in the suit and nodded. "This is my lawyer, Carl. He's here to help me with some personal matters." Carl, who had been silently observing the exchange, stood up as well. He cleared his throat before addressing me. "Mrs. Harris," he began, his tone professional but slightly uncomfortable. "Ben has decided to move forward with a divorce. Stop." I raised my hand, my chest tight with disbelief. This can't be happening. What do you mean, move forward? Why didn't you tell me, Ben?" My voice was louder now, desperate for answers. "We've been married for years. You can't just decide this without any explanation." Ben's face twisted in frustration, but he still wouldn't look at me. "I've been trying to tell you, Sarah. I have. But every time I tried to bring it up, you'd get upset, and I just couldn't. I couldn't deal with it anymore." His words were like daggers, each one striking deeper than the last. I shook my head, tears starting to well up in my eyes. So, this is it? After everything? You've been avoiding me, shutting me out, and now you're just done? The anger swelled inside me. You've been lying to me this whole time. This isn't just about a divorce, is it? There's something more, something you've been hiding. Ben hesitated for a moment, and then, with a deep breath, he finally looked at me, really looked at me, his eyes filled with guilt. It's not just that, Sarah, he admitted, his voice quiet. I've been seeing someone else. The words hit me like a punch in the stomach. My knees went weak, and I had to brace myself against the door frame to stay upright. What? What do you mean? How long? A year, Ben said, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want to hurt you, but I couldn't keep living a lie. I'm in love with her, Sarah. I felt the floor shift beneath me as if the ground had been pulled out from under me. A year, a whole year, and I had been completely in the dark. He'd been seeing someone else behind my back, and now I was hearing this in the most impersonal way possible, through his lawyer in his office. Carl, sensing the growing tension, stepped forward cautiously. Mrs. Harris, he began, his tone diplomatic but firm. Ben wants to ensure that everything is settled fairly. We can discuss the financials, the house, and— I don't want to hear it, I snapped, holding up my hand to silence him. My head was spinning. I couldn't process everything at once. How long had Ben been planning this? How long had he been emotionally checked out of our marriage while I had been pouring everything into it? I turned back to Ben. You're serious, aren't you? I said, my voice shaking. You're really doing this. You've already made up your mind. It doesn't matter what I think, does it? He finally nodded, his face full of regret. I never wanted to hurt you, Sarah. I never meant for it to happen like this, but I can't keep pretending. She makes me feel alive again. Alive, I repeated bitterly, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. Is that what you've been telling yourself? Is that what this is about? You just needed someone to make you feel alive again? While I've been here, building a life with you, loving you, and keeping everything together? Ben winced at the sharpness of my words. He opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off. No, Ben, this isn't just about you finding someone else. This is about you abandoning me. You've been letting me fade into the background while you've been going on with your life, and I didn't even notice. I've been living in a shadow, and you've been okay with that. Ben's face hardened, and I could see the familiar walls go up again, the same walls he'd built over the years. But I wasn't the same woman anymore. I was done playing this game, done begging for the love that was never really there. You think I'm just going to let you walk away and not get some kind of explanation? Not after everything? I took a deep breath, my voice steady. Number, I'm done. I'll sign whatever papers you need, but we are done. With that, I turned and walked out, leaving Ben and his lawyer in that sterile office, surrounded by papers that meant nothing to me anymore. I didn't feel liberated as I thought I would. As I left Ben's office, the weight of the truth didn't immediately lift from my shoulders. Instead, it seemed to settle deeper into my chest. The quiet echo of my footsteps as I walked out of that office felt surreal, as if I were stepping into a new reality, one I wasn't quite ready for. But there was no turning back now. I went back to my apartment, our apartment. It didn't feel like home anymore. The walls seemed to close in around me, suffocating me with the memories of what once was, the furniture, the photos, the little trinkets we had collected over the years. They all felt like an unfamiliar weight, a reminder of a life that had crumbled in front of me. It was hard to breathe in there, and the silence felt deafening. That night, after a long, restless sleep, I went out for a walk to clear my mind. The air was crisp, the streets quieter than usual. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, as if Ben's betrayal hadn't been the only thing I needed to face. There was something more lurking beneath the surface, something that had been hiding in plain sight for far too long. As I turned the corner by the park, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, half expecting it to be another meaningless message from Ben, but instead, it was an alert, a notification from my bank. My heart skipped a beat as I unlocked my phone and opened the message. Unusual activity detected in your account. Large withdrawal of $10,000. I froze. My hand trembled as I scrolled through the details of the transaction. The $10,000 had been transferred to an account I didn't recognize. My mind raced. I had been so focused on Ben's infidelity that I hadn't even considered the financial implications of his actions. He had taken money, a significant amount. My money. I knew I had to confront him about this, but I also knew I couldn't just walk back into his office like some desperate woman. No, this required a different approach. I had been too passive, too compliant, for too long. If Ben thought he could play me like this, taking both my love and my money, then he was sorely mistaken. That evening, I sat in my apartment, the city lights twinkling through the window. The weight of everything hung over me like a dark cloud. I pulled out my laptop and began researching everything I could about the account to which Ben had transferred the money. It wasn't hard to track down the details. Ben's financial manipulations had been carefully calculated, but not carefully hidden. What I found sent a chill down my spine. The account he'd transferred the $10,000 to was linked to none other than Hannah, the woman he had been seeing behind my back. She had access to our finances, and it looked like she had been involved in much more than just an affair. She had been helping him siphon funds from our savings, taking advantage of my absence, my trust, and my blindness. I sat back, the pieces finally falling into place. Ben hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. He had stolen from me. Not only had he lied to me, but he had also stolen my financial security. And now, it seemed, I had to fight for that too. The next day, I called a financial advisor and asked for an emergency meeting. I needed to act quickly. This wasn't just about a divorce or about finding closure. It was about protecting myself from a man who had used me for years. I wasn't going to let him take what was mine, not without a fight. That afternoon, I met with a lawyer. I showed him the evidence, the $10,000 transaction, the messages between Ben and Hannah, and the financial records that clearly showed his betrayal. We discussed my options, including freezing the account and taking legal action to ensure the stolen funds were returned. "You have a strong case," the lawyer said, "but we need to act quickly. If he's willing to go this far, we can't afford to wait around. We'll make sure this doesn't happen again." And just like that, a new chapter began to unfold. No more being the quiet, passive partner. No more allowing Ben to dictate the terms of my life. It was time to take back control. I wasn't going to let him steal from me, not emotionally, and certainly not financially. The next day, I went back to Ben's office, but this time I wasn't alone. I had the lawyer with me, and we were there for one thing: to reclaim what was rightfully mine. When I walked into that office, Ben looked up at me, his face a mixture of confusion and annoyance. "What are you doing here?" he asked, clearly unprepared for what was about to happen. "I'm here to take back everything you've taken from me," I said, my voice steady and strong. "All of it. The love, the trust, and now the money you stole from me." He paled when he saw the lawyer at my side. "This is ridiculous. You can't just come in here and—" "I can," I interrupted, my gaze unwavering. "And I will. You've taken enough from me already." Ben stood up, his face flushed with anger. "I'll fight this, you know. You're not going to get away with this. I'll get a lawyer." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You can try," I said, "but it won't work. You've already lost." The air in Ben's office grew thick with tension as I stood there, the weight of the moment pressing down on both of us. He was on the defensive now, no longer the man who had once been so sure of himself, the man who had assumed he could control me. I had stopped being the woman who would quietly let him walk all over me, the one who would wait for his crumbs of attention and affection. The lawyer beside me shifted, his eyes cold, calculated, and professional. "Mr. Mitchell, we have the evidence, the transfers, the messages, and your history of financial mismanagement of joint funds. This is no longer a matter of just a marriage coming to an end. You've crossed a line, and we're here to ensure it gets rectified." Ben opened his mouth to argue, but the words never came. Instead, he simply slumped back in his chair, his face draining of color as he realized the gravity of the situation. His world of manipulation and control had just crumbled piece by piece. I watched him, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. It wasn't victory I felt, not really. It was relief. The last few months had been exhausting, emotionally, mentally, and financially draining. But as I stood there, I felt the weight of years of neglect, deception, and betrayal lift off my shoulders. "We'll be filing an injunction immediately," the lawyer said, breaking the silence. "This will ensure you can't access any further funds, and we will take the necessary legal steps to secure what's yours." Ben's face hardened, but the spark of arrogance was gone. "This isn't over, Jade. You're going to regret this." I met his gaze, but there was no anger in me. "No," I replied quietly. "I won't." The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal action, bank meetings, and securing what was rightfully mine. With the help of my lawyer, we froze the accounts, withdrew the funds I was entitled to, and made sure everything was documented. Ben tried to fight it, of course, hiring a lawyer of his own, sending threats, but the evidence was too strong. I had finally stepped out of his shadow, and he was left scrambling, unable to regain control. But the most important thing I reclaimed was my peace. As the weeks passed, I began the process of truly moving on. I sold the house. I took the money I was owed and bought a small apartment, a space just for me, filled with nothing but my own things and my own decisions. I spent my evenings cooking the meals I loved, buying flowers for the apartment, and filling the space with comfort. Slowly but surely, I rebuilt my life, not for anyone else, but for myself. I didn't rush into a new chapter. There was no need for grand gestures or immediate changes. The change had already happened, and it was subtle, quiet, and powerful. I no longer felt like a background character in my own life. I had reclaimed my story and my sense of self-worth, and for the first time in years, I felt at home in my own skin. Then, one evening, my phone rang. It was Grace, and for the first time, I felt a genuine smile spread across my face as I answered. "Hey, Mom." Grace's voice sounded lighter, more open than it had in a long time. "I've been thinking about everything, and I wanted to say, I'm sorry. I had no idea how much you were carrying. I'm here for you, whenever you're ready." I paused, surprised by the sincerity in her words. "Thank you, Grace," I said softly, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm okay now, really. I just had to stop pretending I was fine. I needed to take care of myself first." There was a long pause on the line, and then Grace spoke again. I think I'm ready to listen to you, Mom. I want to understand. I want to be here." And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. The months passed, and slowly, the pieces of my life fell into place. The final chapter of my marriage had been written, not in anger or revenge, but in the simple, quiet reclaiming of my identity. I didn't need Ben's approval anymore. I didn't need to make anyone else happy to feel whole. I had learned how to choose myself, and that was all I ever needed. There were still moments of doubt, moments where the weight of my past choices felt heavy, but those moments were brief. They passed with the tide. As I sat on the porch of my new home, sipping tea and watching the sunset over the horizon, I realized that I was at peace, and that, more than anything, was worth everything I had gone through. Sometimes the hardest step is just walking away, but it's also the most freeing.